What a pleasure to be here. I am Lucy Larom, co-chairman of the campaign to end genocide in Uganda now. I share co-chairmanship with Tim I. Hardy. He was a student activist inside the repressive Burmese regime, and he carries on his activism for Burma and for northern Uganda as well. Tim is in New York, I am in San Diego. SIGAN came to being in 2006. Can you hear me?
Yes.
And we're a group of citizen activists. We have many Acholis in the community in San Diego, and we became very concerned about what we saw as the ongoing genocide happening in the north of Uganda in 2006. Our mission became to create awareness of the situation and to advocate for the victims of the genocide in the north. One of the first things we did was since this has been called the worst neglected humanitarian crisis of our times. Think of what that means, the worst of our times, of all of the horrible things happening in 2006. This was the worst. It's been called the secret genocide, the hidden genocide, the brilliant genocide. I could not sit as someone who had lived in East Africa in the 1960s and turn my back on this situation. We had many, many people in San Diego who supported this effort and wanted to shine light on what has been happening in northern Uganda. Things are coming along. We're going to continue to shine light until the last person has walked home from the IDP camps and people are secure in their homes, prosperous, with all the services and all the comforts that every human being on this planet deserves. Okay, so when Museveni came into power in 1986, we know that very soon after that, the people in Acholi, Lengo and Teso as well, I don't want to minimize that, but the majority of the people were Acholi. The people were very marginalized. There was a lot of hate speech. There were a lot of things that set up what we consider the conditions of genocide. You know, you may think this is old hat and, you know, we should neglect it, you know, just forget that's the past. But the thing is, the people continue to be marginalized. The services, even though they're starting to happen, they're not there in full at this time. The conflict, everyone knows who the LRA is, what the LRA has done, a terror organization. The LRA gets most of the bad press about northern Uganda. Since about 1996, people have been forced into the internal displacement camps, which in itself is quite a misleading term. Adam Brandt says, by labeling the interned Acholi IDPs, we hide the fact that they did not flee voluntarily for their safety, but were forcibly displaced and interned in prison camps by the Ugandan government through a campaign of military terror. They've been forced for years to live in camps so wretched that the excess mortality rate reached 1,000 people a week. Indeed, the camps themselves produced the humanitarian crisis, not the other way around. Displacement is a political issue because it was a political decision on the part of the Ugandan government that created the camps where where the crisis exploded. And it's a legal issue because mass forced displacement and internment was a war crime under the Geneva Conventions and a crime against humanity. The people were forced into the camps, homes were bombed, wells were poisoned, cattle were stolen. People were given 48 hours to leave their homes. This is not a government protecting its people. The people were from the beginning treated as prisoners. When they arrived in the camps, they built their own huts in the tiny prescribed space. I was horrified when I first looked at the statistics on the camps and saw 204 of these camps, the smallest being around 300 people, the largest being over 60,000 people. Inside the camps, people were confined. They were not allowed to go out to collect firewood. They were not allowed to go out to try to raise a crop or pick fruit from a tree. Women were raped outside of the camps. It has been, just a horrible imprisonment inside of the camps. Every account I've heard of, the filth, the poverty, the squalor, families crowded into a hut, about this size, 9 people, women waiting in line for water, no latrines, one latrine for, 20,000 people or 1,000 people. How can you exist in a world that, treats your brothers and sisters this way?